In this episode of Watching the Watchers, we're talking about Alec Baldwin, of course, the shooting that took place on the setting of Rust. In particular, the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, came out through her lawyers and said, I didn't do it. It's not my fault. Don't blame me. I'm just the armorer. Everybody else is responsible for this. And so we're going to hear from her attorneys, two individuals, one guy by the name of Jason Bowles and one guy by the name of Robert Gorenchi, and then we're actually going to go through the chain of causation. So, of course, I am a criminal defense attorney. I want to talk through who done it, who did what, and how the different pieces might be interpreted by the prosecution and, more importantly, by the defense, because we have two defense attorneys now representing Miss Reed. And so we're going to go through some of the New Mexico statutes and see how they interface with the chain of causation and see if she actually might be responsible for this thing. So we're going to go into this sort of piece by piece in the first segment. Then in the next segment, we're going to change gears. Talk about this new story that came out from the Wall Street Journal. They wrote a piece saying that the Biden administration was contemplating making settlements with the families and individuals of migrant families that were separated back during the Trump era, saying that they are due damages for the pain and suffering and all the harm that befell their families. And so they're talking about literally $450,000 a person, something like $1 million a family, a lot of money is what we're talking about. And so when I saw the headline, I thought there's no actual way this is true. And it turns out the Wall Street Journal sort of vetted this with multiple different agencies. This is actually a real thing that is being contemplated as a result of a bunch of different settlements that the ACLU is bringing on behalf of the migrant families. We've got a number of different Republican congressmen who are very upset about this. They wrote a letter over to the Biden administration, Department of Homeland Security, and all the different, alphabet agencies saying, we want answers. And so in our second segment, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to hear from Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, who's addressing some of the border stuff. We're also going to check in with former Vice President Mike Pence, who also wanted to weigh in on this. He's doing the media a little bit more, so he may be actually somebody who is running soon for something, maybe the presidency, we'll see. And then in our final segment, we're talking about Florida. Governor Ron Desantis announced a lawsuit against the Biden administration. He's suing Bill Nelson. He's suing NASA. He's suing a bunch of different federal agencies over the Biden vaccine mandate, which is, of course, coming very soon, we're told. A lot of deadlines are coming up, including some federal contractor deadlines, saying if you are a part of the federal government contract and you have employees that are unvaccinated, well, you might not be part of that federal contract anymore. And so that's something that we're going to cover in our third and final segment. And so if you want to be a part of the show, and it's better when you join in, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There's a form over there. It looks just like this. And you can use it to ask questions. You'll see there's a show topics drop down. And if you can, it's useful if you keep your questions in order as we're going out throughout the show, and then I'll be able to get to them in turn. And so over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com is a place where you can join in on the fun. And we're also live streaming on Rumble. We're also live streaming on Twitch. Shout out to my friends over at those two venues, as well as in our secret unlisted YouTube chat. So shout out to Playing Hooky JMS, K-Bean over there. Shout out K-Bean. We've got Vienticus there. And over on Locals, all of my friends, Sweet Potato, Look 2G. We've got Chairman of the Board, Nice Tea, Greg Morat's here, Skip Money, Miss Lucky's in the house, Look 2G, Cat Crap Fever's here, former LEO, and many, many others. And if you're looking for the clips of the show, you'll find those over at Robert Gruler ESQ/clips, where all the different segments are, and you can send those to friends and family. That channel is growing nicely. Thank you very much for your support over there. We certainly do appreciate it. Okay, so let's get into the actual news of the day, shall we? Rust armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed issued a new statement through her lawyers today, indicating that she's not at fault for the shooting that took place on the scene of Rust that involved Alec Baldwin. Of course, we know him as the actual shooter, the person who held the gun in his hand, pulled the trigger, fired the shots that killed Halyna Hutchins and injured Joel Souza. And so in this segment, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to go into Hannah Gutierrez Reed, look at the statement that was put forward by her attorneys, Jason Bowles and Robert lawyer Gorence, they are lawyers out of New Mexico, and they helped draft a statement that we can see is starting to point the fingers away from Hannah, just like good defense attorneys should do. We're also going to review the sequence of events. And so we're actually going to take the different pieces of this case and organize them and create a chain of causation, and then analyze a couple of New Mexico statutes in juxtaposition with the chain of causation. And it's going to make a lot more sense when we get into it. It's going to be a little bit more interesting than what it sounds like, because chain of causation sounds like really boring. But we're going to look at it, and the goal here is to see how a prosecutor might actually charge this case moving forward if they determine there is enough probable cause. So we're going to look at all of that, including the New Mexico statutes for involuntary manslaughter and accomplice liability, because Hannah Reed, even though she didn't pull the trigger, right, she might still have been somebody who contributed to the ultimate death of Halyna Hutchins. And so we've got a lot to get into. Let's start, as we usually do, by taking a look at the board. Here we've got all the required parties, all the interested individuals, and we can see that it is expanding. We started out with just a couple people. Last time we looked at the board, we found out who the sheriff was. We got Aiden Mendoza. We found out who the prosecutor was, Mary Carmack Outwees. Today, we're seeing the defense round itself out a little bit. Over here under Hannah Gutierrez Reed, this is the armorer. We see that she's got two lawyers, and they put out a statement today. We've got Jason Bowles, who joined in. We have Robert Gorenchi. These two guys, both defense attorneys out of New Mexico. And so we're going to go through the chain of causation. Of course, we've got Alec Baldwin here in the middle, kind of the centerpiece, the actual shooter. Halyna Hutchins, Joel Souza, the two victims on the left. And then the assistant director, Dave Halls, sort of was handed the gun, allegedly, by Hannah, who then handed it over to Alec Baldwin, who then shot Halyna Hutchins and then also hit Joel Souza. So we've got that. We're familiar with how that all works. Let's take a look at the headline from Insider. They tell us that the armorer, according to her, was forced by her bosses to cut corners on gun safety. Okay, so we're going to see how this impacts the whole legal analysis here in a minute. But saying her attorneys say in the first statement since the shooting took place, they made the claim on behalf of 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez Reed in a statement on Thursday. First public response: Hutchins died October 22nd. We know that. No charges thus far have been filed. The attorneys for Reed say she was overworked, denied the training she needed in the statement, which was reported by MSNBC anchor Yasmin V. Now, we're going to take a look at the statement, and then we're actually going to break kind of open the sequence of events and then see how this might impact criminal liability. On this channel, we've had several conversations about this. Well, look, you can break this up into a couple different buckets. You could say Alec Baldwin was the guy who pulled the trigger. He's the one who's responsible for her death. He had a duty to inspect the gun. He was the person, I've been somebody who's been around guns most of my life. One of the first things that we ever learn, right? You're responsible for it. Don't point it at anything you don't want to kill. All of those basic sort of fundamental gun prerequisites. So I can understand that argument that whoever has the firearm is responsible for whatever happens with that firearm. But we've seen an alternate interpretation of this entire sequence saying that, yeah, but Baldwin is sort of relieved of any criminal liability because he was relying on other people whose sole job was to make sure that the gun was safe. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, somebody who is an armorer, that's kind of her only job, is to make sure that this all works well. Alec Baldwin's just an actor. What the heck is he going to do, right? And so you're sort of saying that we're going to be delegating some of that responsibility, relieving Baldwin of it, and passing it off to other individuals around. And his public relations team has been making that perspective very well known. But we also have somebody who's kind of an intermediary. We have David Halls, who's the person that got the weapon after Hannah Reed was supposed to presumably be handling it appropriately, and then he was supposed to do something with it, and then that goes over to Alec Baldwin. And so now you can make the argument that multiple people were supposed to be in the chain of ensuring the weapon was safe, and they all dropped the ball, and so that alleviates Baldwin of any of the responsibility even further. But then if you go over to Hannah Reed, you're saying, well, but she didn't pull the trigger. And so what we're trying to do is identify causation. Who's really responsible for this thing? Because it kind of is that there were multiple people involved in this thing. And so we're going to break it down. What we've been speculating is going to happen is that all three individuals who were even a remote proximity to the shooting are all going to start pointing their fingers at each other. This was a Western, right? Don't they call that a Mexican standoff? Can I say that? Is that illegal? But you can, when they're all sort of pointing guns at each other, you drop yours, I'll drop mine if you drop yours, but, one of those things. And this is exactly what's happening. Hannah Reed came out through her attorneys, and she gave us this statement. So they came out. You can see both of them down here in the bottom right. They said specifically, first, Hannah would like to extend her deepest and most sincere condolences to the family and friends of Halyna. She was an inspirational woman. She was also offers her thoughts and prayers, completely beside herself over the events that have transpired. Yeah. Okay. So it's that nice statement of contrition. Good thing to start off with if you're a defense lawyer. Says she would like to address some untruths that have been told to the media, which have falsely portrayed her and slandered her. Safety is Hannah's number one priority on set. Ultimately, this set would never have been compromised if live ammo were not introduced. Hannah has no idea where the live rounds came from. Hannah and the prop master gained control over the guns, and she never witnessed anyone shoot live rounds with these guns, nor would she permit that. They were locked up every night and at lunch, and there's no way a single one of them was unaccounted for or being shot by crew members. Hannah still, to this day, has never had an accidental discharge. Isn't this her first movie? All right. The first one on this set was the prop master, and the second was a stuntman after Hannah informed him his gun was hot with blanks. We're seeing now some other names come in, right? First one on this set was the prop master, so we got a new person who's being introduced into the board, and a second was a stunt man after Hannah informed him his gun was hot with blanks. So got two new parties who were joining in. Hannah was hired on 2 positions on this film, which made it extremely difficult to focus on her job as an armorer. She fought for training, days to maintain weapons, and proper time to prepare for gunfire, but ultimately was overruled by production in her department. The whole production set became unsafe due to various factors, including the lack of safety meetings. Not the fault of Hannah. Hannah and her legal team will address more of these rumors and the whole incident in an upcoming statement next week. All right. Wow. So we've got a lot to break down there, don't we? A lot of finger pointing going multiple different directions here. Let's take a look at who these attorneys are. We've got Bowles. He is somebody who has practiced law for over 20 years. He was a federal prosecutor and a private practitioner, handles criminal civil litigation. Bowles Law Firm, he says we get outstanding results. Here to give you the best opportunity to succeed. So there he is, federal prosecutor. Over here we got Robert Gorenchi, another one of Reed's lawyers. Throughout his career, he's tried over 100 jury trials. That's a lot of jury trials. Member of the New Mexico Bar, U.S. District Court, Special Counsel, Subcommittee, Georgetown University, Marquette Law. Also a U.S. Attorney. First Assistant Chief of the Criminal Division, 14 years as a prosecutor, 62 jury trials, 48 cases before the 10th Circuit. So these guys have been around a while. 2000, left, started private practice, criminal defense. Dozens of criminal cases. Yeah, so he's been around a while. Now, both these guys are former prosecutors, but we're not going to, we won't hold that against them. That's okay. So, all right. So she's got some pretty good lawyers there. I'll tell you that, right? These are guys who've got a lot of experience, former prosecutors, now doing defense work. Isn't her dad a famous Hollywood person? So he probably just went right into that credit card. Here you go, honey. Go get whoever you can out of New Mexico. So now that she's got a defense, let's think about this from her perspective about a defense. I want to run through the chain of causation here. Okay, so we know, given the amount of time we spent on this here on this channel, that this is what this sequence of events looks like. So we can work our way backwards. We have Halyna Hutchins, and of course, incorporating into this, Joel Souza, the director. Halyna is dead. Right? She's not with us anymore. Rest in peace. So we know that Alec Baldwin actually had the gun, shot the gun. So he pulled the trigger in her direction, firing the projectile. She is no longer with us. We also know the sequence of events is that David Halls, the assistant director, apparently said cold gun, handed the gun over to Alec Baldwin before he shot it. And allegedly before that, we know that Hannah Gutierrez Reed over here, the armorer, presumably had custody of the firearm, prepared it before giving it over to Halls. So kind of the standard sequence here. Now, some people have been saying everybody's responsible for this, right? She was contributory, Halls was contributory, Baldwin was contributory, and so they all should be charged. Some people say, nope, it just should be maybe just the armorer. She's responsible for it. She was responsible for making sure that there were no bullets and that the gun didn't have any live ammunition before she handed it to Halls and before Halls gave it to Baldwin. Some people might say it's Halls, right? He was the final checkpoint before it ever landed to Baldwin, and he should have checked and never handed it to him and never said cold gun. Some people say, oh, it's just Baldwin, right? He should have checked it, and he should have been the person who made the final judgment call because he had the gun in his hand. It should end with him. So a couple different ways you can kind of splice and dice this up. Let's think about this in context of Reed here, Hannah Reed. So if you're Hannah Reed, then you might say that my job, my only duty was to load the weapon. That's it, right? I load it. I maintain the inventory of the firearm. All I do is just make sure that I'm following the basic safety protocol. So essentially all I do is load it. Then Halls, he checks it. Then Baldwin uses it. Okay. And so if you were in this situation, Hannah would pretty much escape liability, right? I mean, she's very far removed from the actual death. Halyna over here is dead, but all she did is load the gun. Halls was supposed to check it, and Baldwin was a person who actually used it. So if anything, Hannah was just sort of the first person in a series of dominoes that should have been prevented by both Halls and by Baldwin before Halyna was ever killed. But if you said that instead of just loading it, each one of these people was supposed to be sort of a checkpoint, if we went over here and looked at this and we said, okay, well, Hannah Reed was supposed to load it and check it. Halls was supposed to check it and announce it. And then Baldwin was also supposed to check it before he used it. Now you see that every single one of these individuals is supposed to be checking it. And what does this mean? It means that still Reed is somewhat responsible, right? Because she was supposed to be checking this. She was the first check in a series of checks that should have prevented the ultimate thing from happening. She was a proximate cause, in other words. If she would have appropriately done a check, there's a good argument that this would have never happened. So it's pretty obvious, right, that she wouldn't only be somebody who is responsible for loading it, probably a load and a check as well. So what does Hannah Gutierrez Reed do now if she wants to escape liability? Because right now, if we're looking under these circumstances, it seems like she's pretty well in the chain of causation, because if she would have checked it appropriately, the rest of this stuff wouldn't have happened. If she would have checked it appropriately. So now what did we see from her defense lawyers? How is she going to get around that? How is she going to get sort of escape the problem of not doing this correctly, loading and checking it correctly? Well, we already saw that. She's introducing a third variable, or a sort of a overarching variable. She's talking about the producer. She's talking about the production set. She's talking about the working environment, and who is responsible for maintaining the working environment? Well, Alec Baldwin was a producer, right? He was somebody who was helped running this whole thing. He was the star of the show. The whole thing would never have happened without Alec Baldwin. And so what Hannah's attorneys are saying is that she could not have possibly done a good job loading and checking this. Why? Because Alec Baldwin created a working environment that made it very difficult. She said here, quote, "It made it extremely difficult to focus on her job as an armorer. She fought for training. She fought for days to maintain the weapons. She fought for proper time to prepare for gunfire, but she was ultimately overruled by the production and her department." Who's a part of production? Well, guess what? Alec Baldwin is, isn't he? Who's a part of her department? Who's going to be running her? Who's her boss? Oh, well, David Halls is. He's the assistant director. So she's pushing liability up towards the operations team. The whole production set, she said, became unsafe due to various factors, including the lack of safety meetings. Not the fault of Hannah, is what her team is saying. So what they're essentially trying to do is sever this chain here. They're saying, no, we can't connect Hannah. Liability extends to production, it extends to assistant director, it extends to the actual shooter, but we're going to be able to sever it. Why? Because the subpar working conditions, the negligence that we're going to see as we look into the statutes that are going to be required in order to charge her with an involuntary manslaughter if the negligence was caused by the production team. If they created a working environment that was so bad, then how can she be responsible for failing to do her job? It's their show, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the New Mexico law. So we've already talked about this. This is manslaughter. This is, I think, the charge that fits best for any of the different actors that we've talked about, whether it's Baldwin or Halls or Reed. They all kind of fit into this category. 30.2.3, and it's subsection B. I really think it's involuntary manslaughter. Why? It's because of how the statute is written. It says it consists of manslaughter committed in the commission of an unlawful act not amounting to a felony. So that's part one of this statute. That would not apply, right? This is not an unlawful act. He was allowed to point a gun at her and pull the trigger. So we're going to look at the second part of the statute. It says, or in the commission of a lawful act which might produce death in an unlawful manner or without due caution or circumspection. Okay, so there you go. So commission of a lawful act. So it was lawful for him to actually point the gun at Halyna Hutchins, but it was done so without due caution and without circumspection. So I think this one fits the best. It's fourth degree felony out of New Mexico. And so when we break down this statute, you can see here it comes out with a pretty easy equation that looks something just like this. Involuntary manslaughter equals a lawful act without due caution. So a lawful act plus something done without due caution is going to give you involuntary manslaughter. And so the lawful act is the actual shooting, right, of the gun, not the bullet leaving the gun, but the actual shooting, right? Alec Baldwin, if you're interpreting it this way, right, these are all facts that are going to be subject to interpretation from the jury. But if Alec Baldwin is doing this as part of a lawful act, right? The whole shooting, even pulling the trigger, arguably could have been a part of a rehearsal or a scene or whatever. It's just a blank. Who knows, right? We're not there yet. But that act in and of itself could have been lawful. Without the due caution was without Alec Baldwin checking it. But we're not talking about Baldwin. We're talking about Reed. And here Reed then could have done everything appropriately, but just not exercise caution by putting the ammunition in there, right? And so for her, the due caution doesn't have to be the actual death. It's just the little small sliver that she had in her involvement in the entire chain. So due caution, the lawful act was, preparing the gun, all of that was done appropriately, but her little piece of this was just the ammo. And so that's without due caution. So now let's think about this. We have a couple different areas of the law that we can dig into. What standard now is this without due caution? Okay, so we know that she was involved in the chain. What is without due caution? What does this mean? Okay, we know that the actual shooting, the preparation of the gun, all that other stuff was lawful. So without due caution, what does that mean? Well, here we go. We've got a case from State versus Grubbs that came out of New Mexico. It says a killing by lawful act, which is what we have here, right? Because this is a lawful, actual act of shooting. In order for that to be involuntary manslaughter, it depends on whether the lawful act was done without due caution or circumspection. The phrase without due caution and circumspection has been held to involve the concept of criminal negligence, right? Negligence, then, if it involves a weapon, we have a different state or a different citation in State versus Grubbs. A conviction of involuntary manslaughter by negligent use of a weapon requires negligence, which is just ordinary, okay? It doesn't even require really gross negligence or even really criminal negligence. If it involves a firearm, it's just kind of simple negligence, which means that this is something that I think can be charged easily, right? It's just basic negligence. It's not gross negligence. It's not criminal negligence. It's just negligence, and it's ordinary, right? Which in a legal term is a much lower standard than some of the other standards of negligence. So, and the reason they do that, they elevate it, is because it involves a firearm. It actually involves a gun. So that means you have to be, you don't want to make the standard so that you have to be grossly negligent or criminally negligent when it involves a gun. Just regular negligence is enough. Like, it's like, hey, don't even spin it around your finger. right? You don't have to be like waving it around, doing cartwheels with a firearm. Yeah, that would be gross negligence. But even just, leaving it out on a kitchen table in some circumstances, depending on who's in the household, might be negligent, right? Doesn't have to be gross negligence. So when you have a weapon, it's going to elevate that up. So here now, we've got a situation, which I don't think bodes well for anybody in this case, where if it involves a weapon, involuntary manslaughter, this is by a New Mexico case, State versus Grubbs out of New Mexico, saying that all you need is ordinary negligence. If you have ordinary negligence, well, then that's going to be considered something that reaches the threshold of at least criminal negligence, which is reckless, wanton, and willful, which is the same thing as without due caution, which is this right here. So that fills that portion of the New Mexico analysis, I think. Also, we're talking about causation, right? Who did what and how far removed were the different individuals from the actual death? Unlawful acts must constitute the proximate cause of the homicide to warrant a conviction of involuntary manslaughter. So what this is saying is that Hannah, she had to be involved in this chain of causation, right? If she was not in this chain, then she could not be charged with involuntary manslaughter. So that's pretty obvious. We also have contributory negligence is no defense. So this was an interesting little head note. It says conduct of a driver of a car that was struck by the defendant had no application in trial for manslaughter since it was the criminal negligence of the defendant that caused the death of the two victims. Okay, so what this is saying is that there was another case that also came out of New Mexico where there was a driver that hit somebody and they were killed, and what the person who is being charged with the crime for hitting and killing that person is arguing is that the other person hit them. And so they contributed to that, to their own death. I don't think that's applicable in this case, now that I think about it. Okay, so now let's think about it if we extend it a little bit further. I know this is a legal heavy segment, I get it. But this is interesting. What about as accessory to murder? What about somebody who's sort of an accomplice or aided and abetted, right? How do you get Hannah, who's all the way, two people removed from the actual death, how might she be brought back into this thing? So I think she's not too far removed anyway, currently, but there's another way that they could go. Here is 30.1.13 accessory here in New Mexico. Got some statutes here. It says a person may be charged with and convicted of the crime as an accessory if he procures, counsels, aids, and abets in its commission, and although he did not directly commit the crime, and although the principal who directly committed such crime has not been prosecuted or been convicted of a different degree of crime or has been acquitted. So somebody can be charged even though they didn't actually commit the crime. They talk about what does the word crime mean. So they say, as in armed robbery, the term could simply mean the commission of the crime, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean the specific crime, just the commission of any crime. When one defendant, they give us an example, when one defendant completed the crime of a burglary and they went into a building and his partner knew about that, the partner's intent could be inferred from the acts. All right. So again, this is really heavy legal stuff. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but sort of what we're talking about is specific intent and transferred intent. So this can get really heavy, but what you're talking about is whether or not Hannah Gutierrez Reed, what was her intent here? Okay. Did she intend to kill Halyna Hutchins? No. Right. Did Alec Baldwin? No. Did David Halls? No. Presumably no. Presumably nobody did, and this doesn't turn into a Hollywood horror movie where somebody, put the bullet in there and whatever. If that's the case, then none of them had the actual specific intent to murder the person. But in this case, they could have had the specific intent to essentially be negligent, right? They were allowing an unsafe environment to continue to happen. There was sort of an absence of any proactivity of making sure that this was a safe environment. And so their intent could be very much limited to just sort of their negligence or their inability to act with care that is transferred from Hannah into Halls, into Baldwin, and so they could all be sort of connected in that chain of causation as an accessory. So in this case, right, the partner who was joining the burglar went into the house with the burglar and, didn't necessarily know that he was going to commit the burglary, but is also can be presumed to have the same intent as the partner because he entered the building himself, right? So you can sort of infer and transfer some of the intent between different people. And here, Reed, Hannah, never intended to actually probably load a bullet in there, but we're talking about the intent, sort of the absence of anything that was proactive that contributes to the negligence. Woo, that's some heavy law. I wasn't intending to get into all of that, but that is a lot. I didn't realize how much was in there. But here, the point of this is that you've got a lot of different people pointing different fingers at different people, different intents, and different statutes that are very relevant. It's not going to stop. This is all going to continue to pick up. Hutchins, Reed, I'm getting Hutchins and Halyna. I'm getting Hutchins and Hannah mixed up. But Hannah Reed is just the beginning of this, right? She's just starting to point fingers other directions. Alec Baldwin is doing it too. We can see here that he posts a story blaming his assistant director over the fatal shooting of Halyna Hutchins. He appears eager, according to the New York Post's Lee Brown, to shift the focus from his on-set shooting onto his assistant director, who handed him a loaded gun. 63-year-old actor late on Wednesday tweeted out a news story about assistant director David Hall's admission that, quote, he should have checked all the rounds in the gun before handing it to Baldwin on the new set of Rust, right? Should have checked. Uh-oh. The story, based on a new affidavit released today, also stressed that Hall's apparent oversight came, quote, before he handed a revolver that he had declared cold to Alec Baldwin, meaning the ammo did not have live weapons. Hollywood star, who is also producer of the Doom Western, retweeted the story without making any additional comments. Okay, so here on Twitter, you can see Alec Baldwin did, in fact, retweet that. See that right there? Uh-oh. And I know that's, he didn't write it, but he is endorsing it, and he is retweeting it, and he is making sure that that's the message, right? That is the public perspective on all this. It's Hall's, it's Reed, it's not Baldwin. Let's see what you have to say about this over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see if we've got some questions on the Baldwin stuff. Let's see here. Kenny1B says, are you using a teleprompter? No. Wink, wink. We caught that do-over. I know. You saw it. I know. They're not going to see it in the segment because I'm going to clip that part out, but you just brought it back to their attention. So I botched the intro on this. I do the intros off the cuff. I just kind of go. I just start talking, and I botched it today. So you'll have to catch the live show if you want to see that. We have another one. Geomancy Game says, what would the punishment be to a single person who did this, fired a gun accidentally and killed someone? I believe they'd all have some blame, but as for what the punishment would be, I'm in no way qualified to answer. I'm not either. Geomancy Games, I haven't gone through the New Mexico statutes. And again, it's not as simple as that, right? So it depends on what category it would be. If somebody... It depends, right? There's voluntary manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter, and there's a couple different permutations of it, but it's a lot, right? If you kill somebody, you go to prison for those crimes. We have Let's Go Brandon says, gosh, as the armorer actually is smart and pleaded the fifth, as well as to get good representation, who shut her mouth, unlike that Alex for prison for being a narcissist and get representation? All right. That was a comment right there. Speech Unleashed says, I'm confused. If they were locked up and presumably the armorer should be the only one with a key to them, then how were they able to be used for live shooting by the crew? Second, as the armorer, her primary job description is the safety and the security of the guns. If she felt the set was unsafe and she was prevented from correctly doing her job, then she should have quit. Reputation is everything for that kind of a job. Yeah, I think that's right. That's kind of a good rule of thumb. If you don't want to participate in something that is problematic, then you should leave. Otherwise, you're a part of the problem to some degree. Aren't you? Okay. Good to see you, Speech Unleashed. I agree with you totally. Sergeant Bob says, if Hannah can establish what she alleges, it seems like liability will fall back on the, quote, production company, i.e. Alec Baldwin. I can see the possibility. Harry Truman said the buck stops here. I think this should apply to Baldwin. It's his obligation to pause and check the weapon. I would hope this would set a new and much needed standard, the any weapons handling in Hollywood. Sorry, Rob, we must cut to watch my grandson's playoff football game in Michigan. Go Edwardsburg Eddies. Love it. Go get them, guys, in Michigan. Have fun, Sergeant Bob. It's Friday night. Your son's playing. Curious what position he plays. Maybe he'll tell us next time. Good luck, Eddie's grandson. I'm sorry, Sergeant Bob's grandson. The Edwardsburg Eddies. Good luck, fellas. We have Thunder 7 says, More coincidences about the shooting that make you go, Baldwin is the one who ultimately is responsible for who's hired on set. The experienced armorer quit and this ditzy bimbo was hired. Whoa. Her only experience was one other movie where there was a problem with the guns. Then he hires Halls, who's had 2 previous movie disasters on set, including a death. You don't think Baldwin was hoping that a real bullet would go through these 2 bozos, do you? No, I'm sure it's all purely coincidental. Halyna's tweets were scrubbed off the internet the night of the shooting. Guess that's a coincidence, too. Nothing to see here. Move on, folks. Whoa, Thunder 7. That's a juicy meatball right there, my man. I think you're saying that Baldwin wanted to kill those 2 people. Wow. All right. Well, it's interesting. We'll see what the prosecutors say about it. Vientica says, if I were there and the conditions were that bad, I'd leave. If I needed to stay, I'd make the production company sign a release of liability. But just to be thorough, whether or not it would exonerate me legally is another question based on the laws. It's a good question. Yeah, you really can't contract away criminality, right? Like you can't say like, can you please sign here so that I can rape you at will? And somebody goes, oh yeah, that sounds great, right? That would never happen. Courts would never, it's an unenforceable, unconscionable contract. So you can't sort of limit liability for crimes. Top Chef is here. Damn it. Says, if I hire a sous chef who have poisoned people in the past, and then they cook food which causes food poisoning, which kills one person, am I responsible or are they? Same for the hospital that hires a doctor who's botched surgeries in the past, and then that doctor performs an operation that leads to a patient's death. Where does the buck stop? Yeah, and it's sort of like you don't want to be the head person who hires a bunch of people to do shoddy work and manages them inappropriately. And when the shoddy work causes a problem, all the executives just get to go away and, oh, well, it's not our fault. We didn't do it. Well, we hired people to do the job. Yeah, but they're incompetent. You didn't give them any resources. You trained them poorly. There was no rule, no law and order in what's happening on the set. And they screwed it up. And now you're just like, well, I'm sorry. I mean, they should have known better. No, it's like negligent entrustment of the scene. You can't just hire people who are not qualified and then blame them when something goes wrong. I get it. Yeah, I can see it. We have another one from Speech Unleashed says, I also believe that Alec is responsible because as producer, he did not protect his employees. Even a blank bullet can cause damage. That is why when the scene calls for pointing a gun at the camera, movie sets either use a remote control for the camera so no one is sitting behind it, or there was a real bullet shield material placed in front of the people in the line of fire. Neither were provided, which falls on the producer. Speech Unleashed. It's a good comment. I think a lot of people might agree with you there, Speech. Edon Tess says, I think it is fair to say that there is liability to spread around, but I don't see any way Halyna can escape it completely. This is from Edon Tess, who is an actor. Says, as Armorer, the firearms are in her care, control, and custody. If they were cutting corners, and they probably were, then she should be able to invoke the authority as Armorer to say, no, we have to slow down. That is in the job description and part of safety to prevent this very thing. That is why she should have, quote, control. If the assistant director came to the locker and took it out without her permission, broke a lock or something like that, then that could let her off the hook. But if she touched it before the AD, then it passed through her control. Follow the chain of custody. That's from Edon Test. Good comment there, Edon Test. I think you're right? I think that all those people are in the chain. And if you're a prosecutor, I think you've got a pretty good basis for charging all of them. Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, can't Baldwin use the Hillary defense? He didn't intend to kill anyone. I thought you were going to talk about the bleach bit thing. Oh, did I wipe my servers? What, you mean like with a cloth? I'm Hillary Clinton. So comical. All right, we have Kincaid says, evening, good sir. Wouldn't the contracts clarify responsibilities? Alec's lousy behavior aside, the other two have had professional complications related to firearms handling, civil charges to producers and others involved, however, criminal charges to those legally liable. The Armorer is showing how inept she is. Working conditions or any other factor does not change her responsibilities. I would like to know what producers are liable for. Yeah, that's from Kincaid. And it's a good question. And I think we've got 1 foot in 2 different worlds on this question, sort of 1 foot in the civil world, 1 foot in the criminal world. Yes, I think I'm not a civil lawyer, but I'm imagining there's going to be lawsuits up the yin yang on this case. And it's going to be a lot of yin yang. And so that's a whole separate conversation from criminal. Criminal cases are brought by the government, brought by the state after a long investigation, after the district attorney reviews it. There's going to be all sorts of political pressures flying all over the place, and we'll see where it goes, right? Alec Baldwin's a pretty big name. A lot of people support what he stands for, and so we'll see where it goes. We have Kenny1B says, I really like the legal heavy segments. Thanks. Awesome. Well, that's cool, Kenny1B. Sometimes it's, sometimes we get in there, and that's just scratching the surface on this specific intent, transferred intent, general intent. I know there's some people watching in law school that are in law school who watch the show. You know what I'm talking about, right? You know where this is going to go, and you're happy we didn't go there. We have another one from Hand of Nod, says, to assign blame wholly on any one participant's denies each their agency in making decisions and owning the consequences therein. How cheap is the deceased's life? Let me read that one more time because this is good. To assign the blame wholly on any one participant denies each their agency in making decisions and owning the consequences therein. How cheap is the deceased's life? I'd like to echo Colin Noir's message. This incident is tragic, unnecessary, and arguably a symptom of poor and degrading competence with firearms as a matter of broad society and culture. Alec Baldwin is famously anti-gun. Had Baldwin the beginning of understanding firearm safety, we likely wouldn't be here. The irony is brutal. Perhaps at large Hollywood will upgrade their appreciation of instruments that cause death and injury. Hand of Nod. Love that. Nice comment, Hand of Nod. Yeah, this is a concept that I was reading about in this. I told you about this book a couple times, Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. He talks about the idea that certain systems are anti-fragile. In other words, if there's harm that befalls the system, they actually get better as a result of it. Common example would be airplanes, right? Every time an airplane falls out of the sky, kind of the rest of the airline system gets a little bit more robust, gets a little bit stronger. Everybody goes, well, what the heck was that all about? And so they get the black box, they open it up, and they say, well, this guy was a scumbag and did this and all these things. And so they stop that from happening again. And in theory, the entire industry gets stronger as a result of it. Same concept happening here, right? This happened, haphazard, lackadaisical gun policies there that were in place, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. Jeremy Matrita says, why hasn't Baldwin's attorney advised him to remain silent? Every tweet and retweet can and will be used against you in a court of law. He has the right to remain tweetless, which is very true, Jeremy. And this is a complicated, concept, right? We got again, two worlds going on. We've got the criminal legal world. You've also got the court of public opinion. And this is something where it's not as one-sided as usual, right? This isn't a George Floyd, Derek Chauvin situation. This isn't an Ahmaud Arbery, McMichael situation where most of the public is sort of on one side, right? This has a lot of different permutations here. Alec Baldwin did it. Alec Baldwin didn't do it. And so they have to almost duke this out in the court of public opinion as well as in the courts of law. Because what happens if you don't? Isn't that almost malpractice? What happens if you're Hannah and you just let if you're Hannah's lawyers and you just let all of the other defendants out there who could be potential co-defendants, you could just let them it's all Robert's fault, all of them. And you just go, I'm not going to say anything about that, right? Now you fast forward 2 years from now when this case is working its way up to trial. And for the last 2 years, your co-defendants have been beating you up in the news saying you're responsible for all this. Now you got to go and unring that bell in front of the juries. Exactly what we're doing in some of these cases. Kyle Rittenhouse, we're having arguments about who to call what, right? And what labels and what names you can use. A lot of that is sort of trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And so right now you can see all sides are being very aggressive in the court of public opinion to try to make their case heard. Okay, a couple more here. Quarantine Mike says, will this movie be released? It will not. I think it's a serious question. It will not. Production's over. It's not going to happen. Radicy is here, says, John Schneider, actor, stated with today's technologies, there's no excuse for having a real gun on a set. He made a video with a gunfire coming out of his finger. Maybe this will change rules on other movie sets. Yeah, I don't know, Radicy. It's a good one. Good question. Monster One says, aren't these people rich? Can't they afford good lawyers who will tell these people to shut the hell up? I've had public defenders who were better. First thing they would say is don't talk to anyone. It's a good point, Monster One. But again, what are you going to do? Just be silent and let everybody else point fingers at you? It's going to be a national story for the foreseeable future. Go Navy 505 says there are no exception in the law for if you are, quote, shooting a movie or someone yelled cold gun. At least not to my knowledge. Yeah. Right. That's exactly right. I don't care if it's Alec Baldwin. Okay. I don't care. Nobody cares. Somebody shot and killed somebody else. Right. That's sort of the prosecution's perspective, or it should be. But it becomes complicated now. Oh, it's a movie, and movies are special, and celebrities are special, and they get all different types of benefits than many other people do, no doubt. Monster One says, "Are you using LexisNexis?" I don't use that. We have some people here at our office that do. I think we have kind of a split between LexisNexis and Westlaw. Arizona, we also have Fastcase. I think we get that for free. Yeah. Captain Jim says, Rob, this segment is where your content is masterful. Your coverage of national issues is pretty good. I enjoy your analysis, but this is where you take it to another level. Been watching you since Kyle Rittenhouse back in 2020. Keep up the good work. From Captain Jim. Well, thanks, Captain Jim. I was going to say, unfortunately, there's not always very interesting legal cases like this, but maybe that's a fortunate thing that we don't have these types of tragedies that need some analysis. But thank you for that, Captain Jim. I appreciate it. This is kind of my element, right? This is what I do. So I'm a lot better at this than I am, dunking on Joe Biden. But I like to dunk on Joe Biden. So we'll see. We'll continue to balance it out, but I appreciate that. Very good feedback, Jim. Jay, he says, I don't see how she's not at fault when she is responsible for all the guns all the time on the sets. I've read too many other witness statements that contradict what she is saying. If she felt she was unable to fully do her job 100% without any worry or concern, then she should have quit. So what supposedly happened on her previous movie never happened, was not her fault. I don't buy it. It's from Jay Heath. Yeah, she doesn't want any involvement in it. I was just responsible for managing the inventory and managing the ammo, but Halls checked it, so we're supposed to, and said it was clear, right? So she points back over to them. Bo Jiden says, the buck stops with me. We have Viking says, so many layers of responsibility that failed. Many wrongful discharge incidents have only one layer. Okay, so Hannah had too much work and not good enough training. However, with respect to her most important function, she failed. So sad for the victims' families. It's a good point, Soul Viking, yeah. It is a good point. All the other responses, I don't care if she had to go get coffee or whatever. You had one job. Make sure nobody dies with a gun on the set. You failed. So that's negligent. Former LEO says, I started out with a cross-draw holster because we wore long coats in the winter. I was always uncomfortable because you swing the barrel across unintended targets. They soon eliminated long coats, and I went back to a conventional holster. That's from former LEO. Yeah. I was watching actually a YouTube video of the Colt 45 in action. I was watching how the action works on the Colt 45. And it was interesting. Tsunami Tommy is here, says, why was he pointing the gun at her? Was she an actor too? I think she was just the camera woman. So I think she was actually, or the cinematographer, excuse me. She was behind the camera and she was filming. And so the movie scene was him doing one of those, but and so he had to point at her direction. Happened to be a real bullet in there. Not good. Shade says, reminds me of January 6th, everyone at the top pointing fingers who was in charge, just like another government classic. Yeah. It's kind of human nature. When stuff goes wrong, everybody, yikes. It's like, that was your idea. You approved that. You actually pulled the trigger on that. Yeah, but I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't anywhere. It's not my fault. The gun was in your hand though, and you squeezed it and a bullet came out and killed her. Yeah, but 1 second though, somebody else handed me the gun. Oh, well, in that case, I guess you're relieved of liability, sir. Sorry for the trouble. Go back to Hollywood. We'll see you in the next one. All right. Another couple questions from former LEO says, this is exactly what happens when the public likes the suspect more than the victim. Yeah. Right. They're taking full advantage of that. Alec Baldwin has a big fan base. Monster One says, why is the saying the buck stops and not the bus stops? After all, a bus's entire job is to stop. If the buck stops, he gets shot, probably by Alec Baldwin. It's a great question. Is that what they're talking about? Bucks? I thought it was like bucks like dollar. The bucks stop here. What does that mean? Harry Truman. Let's pass the buck, which means passing the responsibility to somebody else. Okay, but where does the buck? What is the buck? What I'm trying to understand what the buck is. I don't know what it is. Is it a deer? Because if the buck gets shot, if the buck stops and it's a deer, according to Monster One, then it dies because it gets shot by Alec Baldwin. But if it's a dollar bill like currency, and the buck stops here, I don't know. It's a complicated question. It's a good one. I'll have to look into that. I don't know. We have Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, you invoked my aviation background. The NTSB recreates an accident. It's able to play back and analyze every data point. And if they determine the cause of the accident could have prevented, they recommend to the FAA, and the FAA adds another lot of the books. Unfortunately, the movie set doesn't have a black box, although it would certainly help. It would certainly help. It's too bad they didn't have any cameras there. Hillary Clinton says, tell Jeremy to keep my name out his mouth or I'll send him on vacation with Epstein. Whoa. Hillary. Whoa. Fireball over there. She's a little unhappy. Johnny Cochran's in the house. Says, since you're a famous YouTube star now, I would defend you anytime, Robert. Well, thanks, Johnny. I appreciate that, my good man. We'll catch up one of these days. We have another one from somebody says, all three are equally responsible. No name. Magic Mike says, to prevent this from happening, every cameraman should wear a bulletproof vest and helmet. Yeah, in addition to their COVID masks. So they should just be like bubble wrapped up everywhere they go. Ghost Gunner says, I'm standing behind Alec Baldwin because I'm sure as hell not standing in front of him. Hey-o! From Ghost Gunner. I hadn't heard that one. Sweet Po Tay To says, I feel like a young woman gun enthusiast is one of us normally, but those pics of her posing with the weapons give me some weird, I don't know what I'm doing with my favorite movie is Natural Born Killers vibe for sure. Yeah, it's like, what's the meme? What's the meme of what's that actor's name? He's like, hello, fellow high schoolers, you know, with the skateboard or something like that. That's kind of what she's got, right? So probably like this probably like this Beverly Hills, born, Hollywood, teen Instagram model. They give her some guns and she's taking some pictures with it. I'm an armorer now. Goes on a podcast. She knows trigger discipline, but not the difference between a blank, a dummy, and a live round. It's rough. Good to see you, Sweet Po Tay To. And former LEO says no cameras or cell phones because Hillary smashed them. Yeah, like with a cloth. All right, those were great questions over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Thank you for being here, being part of our community, and joining in when we record this show at 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Okay, and we're going to jump into our next segment. Got a lot of the heavy lifting with some of the legal stuff out of the way, so now we can take a look at what's going on with the border. Isn't that nice? All right, and the sun is coming in. I forgot to put those shades down in there. All right, but let's get into it. Okay, the Biden administration allegedly announced that they're going to be paying $450,000 per individual to illegal migrants that came across the border back when Trump was in office. That's a lot of money because a lot of people came across the border back then. We're going to jump into this. A lot of Republicans are very unhappy about it. Wall Street Journal came out with an article. We're going to go through it. See if we can get our bearing straight on this. Kind of sounds like one of those things that you would never think could possibly happen. Why would they be paying people who entered into the country illegally almost $500,000? Doesn't sound like it's even real. Wall Street Journal did some digging and they've corroborated this from multiple different sources, from different agencies in the federal government, all a part of settlements that were due for lawsuits that were brought by the ACLU. So we're going to go through this. We're also going to take a look and hear from Mike Pence. He came out this morning and he was having a conversation with some people over on Fox, calling this what it is, a magnet for more immigration. We're also going to hear from Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, and we're going to check in with the Republicans who drafted a letter and sent that over to the Department of Homeland Security. I want to start off by talking about the author of that letter. You can see here, this is written by Congressman Greg Murphy. He's a doctor out of North Carolina, the 3rd District, and he says, breaking. I'm leading a letter demanding answers from the Biden administration regarding their reported plans to send $450,000 checks to illegal immigrants. Calls this an asinine pro-crime idea. It's going to open the floodgates of the border. And when I saw this headline, I got to be honest, I was super skeptical about it. What are they talking about? It turns out there's some actual legal underpinnings here. I can actually see this now happening. Wall Street Journal reported they're in talks now, the U.S. government, to pay hundreds of millions to families separated at the border. Literally, government considering $450,000 per person affected by Trump's zero tolerance policy in 2018. So what they're going to be saying, right, the nuts and bolts, the high-level overview, is Trump did something to harm people. Those people have been harmed, and they're due compensation. Who harmed them? The government did. Therefore, what happens? Well, they got to be compensated. Who pays for it? You do. The government does. The taxpayers do. And they're going to blame this all on Trump. Well, we had no choice. That racist, bigoted, xenophobic monster, that orange maniac, made us do this because he harmed these poor migrants who, of course, all broke the law and came here illegally. All right. So we go back to the article. Tells us that Biden is in talks to offer immigrant families that were separated $450K apiece. Several agencies now are working to resolve lawsuits filed on behalf of parents who say the government subjected them to lasting psychological trauma. Okay, dragging your children several thousand miles into a country illegally, perfectly okay. Dealing with the U.S. government for breaking the law, psychological trauma, suddenly. Okay, so by having a federal government that wants to enforce its border and has some enforcement mechanisms when you get there, psychological trauma. Well, that's just outstanding. I can tell you this. I've got a whole bunch of clients who've had a lot of psychological trauma at the hands of the government. Should they be getting $450,000 apiece? Maybe. U.S. Department of Justice, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services are considering payments that could amount to close to $1 million a family, though the final numbers could shift. Most of the families that cross the border illegally from Mexico to seek asylum include one parent, one child. Many families would get smaller payouts depending on their circumstances. So 2 people, $500,000 a pop, $1 million apiece, $1 million a family. ACLU, which used to be a reputable entity in this country, no longer, represents families in one of the lawsuits, has identified about 5,500 children separated at the border over the course of the Trump administration. Number of families eligible to receive a settlement could be smaller, but could be around 940 claims, which is a lot of money. The potential payout could be $1 billion or more. President Biden, according to somebody at the ACLU, has agreed that family separation is a historic moral stain on our nation, must be fully remedied. From the ACLU, that remedy must include not only meaningful monetary compensation, but also a pathway to remain in the country. Can you believe these people? So if you come here and the U.S. government tries to enforce the law, and you're separated from somebody because we can't identify whether it's actually your kid, whether you're smuggling children or whatever the situation is, and you go through the regular enforcement process that was a legitimate thing, ACLU springs into action. They want them compensated for that harm, and they also want them made full citizens. And so if you can't imagine that being a magnet to any other potential person who wants to come to the United States, I don't know what's a better magnet. I mean, good Lord. I might go down there and try to break back in here for $500,000. What a stinking joke. In his first weeks in office, Mr. Biden pledged to reunite the separated families, describing these actions undertaken as a moral and national shame. Yeah. Has he seen what he has caused down at the borders? Has he seen what he has done there with the Haitian migrants down there at Del Rio, Texas? A DHS spokeswoman referred questions to the Justice Department, where a spokesman declined to comment. HHS didn't respond to a request for comment. Yeah, because they are hiding like vermin in the crevices of their bunkers. Here was Mike Pence on with Fox and Friends talking about this morning. Had basically called it exactly like it is. Now, it's a magnet, totally unacceptable. Here is Mike Pence. Don't see much of him. I haven't seen much of him. Here he is.
My reaction is totally unacceptable. Of course, their whole policy at the southern border has been a disaster from day one. It's remarkable to think that under our administration, we built 400 miles of border wall, and literally by implementing what was known as the Remain in Mexico policy, we reduced illegal immigration by 90%. President Biden rescinded that policy on day one. It's being litigated in courts right now, but the reality is that they've unleashed the worst border crisis in more than 30 years. And it's all been because of dismantling policies that were working, but also sending a message south of the border that America's borders are open to people coming north and entering our country illegally or abusing our asylum system. And this is just one more message that is going to continue to be a magnet on people that are coming north of the border. What we've got to do is get back to what was working, re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy, require people to wait in Mexico when they apply for asylum, and let's not be paying millions of dollars a week to pay people not to build the wall. Let's get back to building the wall. That border security worked.
But Mr. Vice President,
just one more example of a disastrous policies that violate the common sense of the American people.
What?
Yeah. So, look, all that footage, right, that you saw that was playing alongside him, that was from Wednesday, right? So there's a whole additional migrant caravan that it's working its way back up, and it's coming right back into the country, just like we just saw. We just got over the last one that had the Haitian migrants out there in Del Rio, Texas. And so every time this happens, right, the last time we saw, there were kids that were just dumped in bushes. People are going to be, dragging themselves literally thousands of miles in order to get into this country. And I can't blame them for wanting to be here, but I can certainly have disdain for our government that causes people to do stuff like this to people throughout the world. It really breaks my heart. You can see this is what Gref Jenkins posted here on Twitter. A migrant caravan marches again towards the U.S., undeterred by Mexico's Marcelo Ebrard telling them that they're not going to succeed. And you can just see, right? It's like it's a huge throng of people, and there's kids and babies you're going to see walking thousands of miles. And why wouldn't they? Because when they get here, all right, well, they'll be here soon, and, probably not all of them. So that's caused by the magnet that Mike Pence just described, 450,000 a pop. And as far as I can tell, there are more people suffering due to the immigration crisis now than there were a year ago or 2 years ago. Dramatically more. Okay, so let's take a look at this letter. I mentioned that the Republicans are very unhappy with all of this. They drafted a letter out. They sent it to Merrick Garland, the Honorable Merrick Garland, Xavier Becerra, United States Health and Human Services. We've got Mayorkas over from DHS, says, we write today with severe concerns regarding recent reports that your three agencies are in discussions to offer illegal immigrants that unlawfully crossed the border in 2018, $450,000 apiece. The rationale for this egregious abuse is lasting psychological trauma. Do, however, note that these persons cross into our country knowingly illegal manner, fully aware of the consequences. Actions have consequences, the Republicans say. We're a nation of laws, they must be enforced. You're going to be rewarding criminal behavior, and it's going to send a message to the world that the borders are open. Biden administration, they say, have been incentivizing illegal immigration since its first day in office, obviously, through a series of catastrophic failures, including stopping the border wall, halting Remain in Mexico, rolling back Trump's protections, under President Biden witnessing the worst numbers in a generation, which is absolutely true, right? It's like the numbers are insane. If your administration decides to give out financial compensation, you will incentivize migrants from more than 150 nations to surge our border. According to recent data, for example, 1.7 million illegal immigrants have attempted to cross in fiscal year 21 alone. Projections of 2 million more before the end of this year. U.S. Border Patrol reported nearly 200,000 encounters among the border with Mexico earlier this summer in July, highest in more than 2 decades, right? It's getting dramatically worse. Compensating families who crossed our border illegally is going to exacerbate this problem. Cartels are going to take advantage of this as well. It's disastrous, going to cause more people to want to come. Paying thousands of migrants $500,000 each is going to cost $1 billion or more. Average Americans make $68,000 a year. Compare that to life insurance for military members, $400,000. The idea that you're going to give illegal foreigners who broke the law that same amount as Gold Star families is shameful. Well, that's a emotional argument right there, isn't it? You don't even give the families of our dead troops that amount of money. It's an emotional argument right there. Love it. At a time when the American household is dealing with historic rates of inflation and the price of average goods they've risen exponentially. How could you possibly compensate all those illegals for that? The compensation is going to cost billions of dollars. We should be fixing our bridges. We are extremely alarmed about this misguided policy. We're in the country to be strong and brave, not take shortcuts. Constitution says we the people, not we the government. Listen to us, heed our concerns, and meet with us to discuss this urgent travesty. Signed off on by Gregory Murphy, Andy Biggs, Dan Crenshaw, Roger Williams, Dan Bishop, Dan Longhorn, somebody, Jim Hagedorn, Claudia Tenney. That's a very sternly worded letter. Wow, pretty emotional. I like it. Is it going to do anything? No, but it's a nice letter, though. Okay, but let's see somebody who is doing something a little bit. We have Governor of Texas Greg Abbott, who is he's doing something, which is interesting. He was on Tucker Carlson's show yesterday. Let's listen in and see what he had to say about what they're doing down there in the great state of Texas. Here he is.
Mexico.
I'll tell you exactly what we are doing, but I want to emphasize a phrase you used earlier, and that is the Biden administration is actively encouraging this, which is in contrast to what the Trump administration did. So once the Biden administration has taken over, what Texas has done, we now have 6,500 National Guard and DPS troopers on the border to help secure the border. And as we're talking right now, they are identifying locations on the border where they are laying down razor wire to secure all the possible crossings that these caravans may be coming to. And then in addition to that, beginning today, we begin dropping these large containers that you see on 18-wheelers that you also see on these ships that are going across the ocean. We're dropping them down on locations that could be crossings that would be used by these caravans to serve as a blockade to prevent them from coming across the border. And then on top of that, if they do come across the border, the National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety, they are authorized to arrest any of these people who make it through our blockade efforts and put them in jail for violating a crime of criminal trespass in the state of Texas.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, look, I've been critical about a lot of governors for this, right? Even here in Arizona, Governor Ducey is like, oh, border, always a problem. It's like, it's your state, dummy. You've got the National Guard. Go out and do something about this. You've got a lot of things that you can do. There are all sorts of Arizona laws that you can impose, just like that one, criminal trespass, right? That's a pretty obvious one. Might be a good place to start. My point here is that they just do a lot of talking. And these are governors of states that have had their entire states encroached upon by the feds. So stand up and do something about it. It's your state and your people. That's why we have states, to push back against the feds, right? We got a system where there is dualism. So he's doing something about it. Okay, let's see what you have to say about this over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Questions in the house. Bucks is a slang term for money. That's from Look2G. Thanks for looking that up. We have, let's see, Kamala Harris says the border is not under control. Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, this logic dictates that many laws are causing harm to people. This would set a precedent to bankrupt the country. It's like, listen, it's like any time that somebody's offended by government enforcement of the law, are you entitled to compensation? There's a lot of people sitting in prison who might feel that they are. They also broke the law, but they didn't get $450,000, did they? They're also separated from their families. Where's their $500,000? Not anywhere. Speech Unleashed says the separation of families was done during the Obama administration. When are the rest of us going to get $450K for the long-lasting psychological damage for all the policies of the Biden administration? That's why the Republicans should have never gone along with the Dems on raising the debt ceiling. That's from Speech Unleashed. Yeah, there were all sorts of families separated under COVID policies last year. Don't leave your house, Grandma, because if you do, you're going to kill everybody. Oh, yes, Mr. Fauci. There were people hugging their family members in bubble wrap. Remember that? Bubble boys having their arms go through the bubbles and like hugging grandma, like all like mashed up against plastic with each other. That's family separation right there. $500,000. Full million, because there's two people on either side of the plastic. Good to see you, Speech Unleashed. We have another one from former LEO says, I believe that the ACLU is involved with this scam because it's just OPM and they get 30%. Give the National Guard live ammo. I'm not endorsing that idea either, right? We don't want machine gun sandboxes down there. But OPM, other people's money. That's what former LEO was talking about. Geomancy Game says, I'm completely disabled, battling cancer, trying to scrape everything I can to continue to raise my son. I have been denied SSI twice. Yet these people get to break the laws and be given more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. I'm sick of this. I'm fighting every day to try and show people how corrupt the people in charge are, but I have every single tech entity pushing back. Things need to change ASAP. I feel we are on the precipice from something we cannot turn back from. I think that's a good point there, Geomancy Games. A lot of people have been sort of feeling that, right? That stuff is sort of at a juncture in many ways. Sort of an energy level that feels interesting. A lot of people are feeling it right now. Look, Geomancy Games, he has a channel on YouTube. He's doing great work. Go support him. Go subscribe to his channel if you'd like to. Geomancy, keep your head up, man. Keep hope alive. My thoughts and prayers are for you, going out for you. I'm sure the rest of the audience feels the same way here in our amazing community. So hang in there, brother. Jay, he says, so does that mean I'm entitled to a $450K check due to Biden's incompetence? I renounce my citizenship, and I'm going to give the ACLU a call next week. Show me the money. Woo. Is that all I got to do? Maybe Joey and I will go down to the border and we'll just get separated. We'll both get a $500,000. We'd be fine. He'd be fine. Thunder 7 says, these families were desperate to leave their countries with cartels killing everybody. It wasn't right that children were taken from the parents. It was cruel. Sessions was the architect, but Trump allowed it. And even Melania said it had to stop. They literally took babies from nursing mothers. These kids may never get over the trauma. I do think they should be compensated, and talking about the border crisis is not even relevant to what's happened to these poor families. Arrest them, deport them, but don't take the kids away. It's another perspective on there from Thunder 7. And I can understand that, right? Yeah. If you're taking a mother away from her nursing child, that is a traumatic thing. No doubt about that. Thanks for sharing that, Thunder. Former LEO says, how would you define an invasion? I would say when you have 200,000 people coming across the border every month, that fits it. I don't know if that's the official definition, but I think it fits. We have Speech Unleashed says, Biden needs to buy more illegal votes for the Dems in the future, elections with taxpayer money. This is exactly what Biden wants, so he won't blink an eye at that letter. No, he will not. They don't care. Right in the shredder. Right in the garbage can. Thanks, Republicans. Right in the dumpster. Soul Viking says, truly ridiculous. We unfortunately never will know the correct number of children arriving to the border with a person or persons who are not their parents. However, it is the duty of the government to make sure that the children arriving with adults are not being trafficked. The use of other people's children as props is very common. Therefore, DNA testing is required, and this takes time. When illegal aliens disappear before the testing results are complete, separation results. Fast and comprehensive deportation is necessary. That comes in from Soul Viking. Nice comment there from Soul Viking. Thanks for chiming in with that, Soul. We've got a J6 defendant. Just kidding. It's Edon Test says, I was caught Oh, wait. I think I spoiled that. I was caught trespassing at a government facility. I was arrested and separated from my family for months in jail. Now I'm facing years, maybe. Police pointed guns at me. I was treated somewhat roughly, causing me all kinds of emotional distress. When do I get my check? Signed by the January 6th defendant. Just kidding. It's Edon Test. Yeah, it's a nice little, way to analogize between the two. Bill Givens says, Rob, the way I am seeing this is that someone can send their kids into our country illegally, then come over themselves, given citizenship without going through what people who come across illegally have to do, and on top of it all, be giving $1 million of money earned by U.S. citizens. Is that right? Yeah, that's right, Bill. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a nice summary. You just nailed it. A+, young man. Well done. You pass. You got it. That's what we're talking about. I know you have to repeat it because we're living in like bizarro land. What? That can't be right. Let me type this down and make sure this makes sense. Yeah, you got it, Bill. That's what's going on right out there. I know. Be Brave says, laying down razor wire sounds like illegals will be filing civil suits for injuries. The government might just give more handouts. Literally, that's exactly what I thought. Remember when I was talking about this, right? That Look, the ACLU is going to jump all over that. If somebody gets injured as a result of state enforcement, they're going to say the state had no jurisdiction to go enforce the border. That all resides within the government, the federal government's purview. Federal government has completely abdicated any responsibilities on the border, but they're right. Technically, they're right. So what the ACLU will do will then file lawsuits in Texas, and what's going to happen is the ACLU is going to sue in federal court and probably going to win. It's insane. It's just insane. This country is in some deep trouble. Where's my money? I can't even get unemployment. Yeah, I know. Well, go cross the border. Nadarb says, the most recent group of people is being pushed by some nonprofit named after one of Obama's little catchphrases. Can't remember it right now. Either way, the supposed leader of this group was talking to the media about a week or two back. He was straight up saying, we will get into the United States or we're going to die trying. These people are being urged and propped up. Now they feel emboldened to make threats on camera to our country. Biden administration is not on our side. That is from Nadarb. Let's see what else. A couple more. Monster One says, so we are going to have to pay people for breaking the law? Simply because Trump actually followed the law. By law, children have to be separated. It goes back to Clinton and the Flores decision. You can't house children with adults. How many Americans get separated from their children when they commit crimes? Answer, all of them. They're in jail. Yes, that's true. Right. I know a lot of people who at some point were separated from their families. And they also broke the law. Where's their 500,000? Kincaid says, it seems like they are throwing everything at Trump. Insidious social engineering aside, progress should be tempered with national solidarity. So much is being torn asunder. What's the end game? The shining examples of relatively free social advanced nations have these features. Smaller populations bonded by religious value systems that restrict social freedoms considered fundamental in the U.S. Heavily regulated economies with higher taxes. The U.S. is not a good fit. Interesting comment there, Kincaid. Yeah, I was watching, I'm trying to learn a little bit more about this fella called Klaus Schwab over from the World Economic Forum. A lot of people have been pointing towards him as sort of the boogeyman. And guess what? They're right. Yeah, I was watching some of his conversations yesterday talking about, he did an interview with somebody talking about this like global superstructure that has corporations and governments intertwined in these massive data repositories, and it's all going to be interconnected. All of it's the guy's nuts. He's talking about sort of this AI fascistic state, and he's I think running things. So that's not too good. We have another one from Look2G says, it's obvious to me this administration has no interest in representing U.S. citizens. I'm starting to wonder, though, if these decisions are just a means to create slush funds where politicians and NGOs can get paid on the backside of these terrible policies. Yeah, because if they create a problem, if they allow a problem to be created, they need funding to solve the problem. And the funding goes to all of their political cronies. We know how this game goes. A Hitler, struggling artist, is here. Not Adolf. A Hitler, okay? Just so take it easy. Here it says, as a legal migrant to Germany, we also have this problem in Germany. As a tax-paying citizen, it makes me so mad, not at the migrants, but the government for allowing this to happen. This is one way to destroy the state from within. Is that very astute? Astute, yeah. It's a very astute comment there. A Hitler, who is an artist, not the genocidal dictator. Struggling artist, just like Hunter Biden, so have empathy, okay? They're working hard out there. Monster One says, why do these people want to come here? Didn't they hear it's a white supremacist nation? There's a really bad male patriarchy here too. Not only is it white and supremacist, it's also male and patriarchal. Whew, this country. Wow. Kincaid says, Geo, hang in there. It is common to deny 3 times in most areas. That's from Kincaid. Hang in there, Geo. Monster One says, I fully endorse machine guns. Start out with rubber bullets or blanks or dummies. I don't endorse machine gun turrets. Perry Masonary says, let's give all illegals the votes. Never mind U.S. law. If they're getting $500,000 on top of it, why not give them a vote? I mean, it's basically their country now, as far as I can tell. Old cat lady, still grouchy over that one, says, I want my $459,000 for lasting psychological trauma when they close down my gym and my pool. I feel you on that. I think it's worth way more than that. I want like 10 mil for that. That's how mad I was. That's how much psychological anger I had when they did that to us. Health crisis. No, Jim, get out of here. Former LEO says, it almost appears that the plan by the Democrats is to force this country into a real insurrection. Everybody has an ultimate bull S tolerance level. I hope that never happens, but it appears that may be the goal. Might be, right? There's a concept that is called accelerationism. It's like, let's accelerate the conflict in society so that we can see it break down more quickly. Good argument that some people want that now. Sweet Potato says, third generation Mexican American. My family members went through so much to come here legally, study hard, gain citizenship. Me and my siblings all have very, quote, American names because my parents worried about how our job applications would look, LOL. We adopted American culture to fit in. Less Spanish, more English. It is wild to see people marching by the thousands, and now you get scholarships and handouts all day. Diversity and inclusion rules now lean toward discrimination against my white side. Weird times we're living in. Oh, man, that is an interesting comment, Sweet Potato. Lean towards your white side. Diversity and inclusion rules now lean toward discrimination against my white side. Interesting. Yeah, see, I don't have that same vantage point. Very interesting. Thanks for that context. I think you're onto something there. Monster One says, to Thunder 7, it's a law that goes back to the Clinton years. Trump didn't start family separation. Please do some research. That's from Monster One. So we got a little, we're all learning here together. Former LEO says, how about building a new border wall 5 miles north, and then it is Texas's border? Then that is the Texas border, not the international border, from former LEO. Maybe they're doing something like that, right? I don't know. Be Brave says, I'm reading Klaus's book right now, Know Your Enemies. That's a good idea. I was thinking about that. He's got 3 of them. He actually has one, I think more than 3, but he has one recently that is the COVID-19, the Great Reset, right? So I'm going to take a look at that one. Yeah, the guy is trouble. Former LEO says, the best tool to stop the invasion is no benefits for non-citizens. It would stop it overnight. Globalism, one world government, universal money, all signs of end times coming. That's from No Name on that. And our last one from Captain Jim says, I'm really curious, who's organizing these migrant caravans, though? Really curious. Who got them all of those Biden-Harris t-shirts? Yeah, a lot of resources must be. Who's organizing all of this, right? A lot of camera people, a lot of people walking through. Very interesting. Very curious stuff. Those were great questions from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We record this show live every day, Arizona 4 p.m., 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And so if you want to be a part of the show, head on over. Join us at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where we have a lot of fun, learn a lot, be a part of a great community. Look forward to seeing you there. Okay, we've got one final segment on the show today. And let's see what we've got here. Oh, yes, Florida. All right, I had a couple things pop. Okay, ready to go. Florida, Ron Desantis decided to sue the Biden administration over the vaccine mandates. We're going to get into this, but there was a federal lawsuit filed in the District Court of Florida for the Middle District out of the Tampa Division, suing a lot of different people. We're going to hear from the Governor DeSantis himself. He's going to explain what this lawsuit is about. We're also going to hear from the Attorney General out of Florida. Her name is Ashley Moody, and we're going to see sort of what their posture is. Then we're going to take a look at the actual lawsuit itself and see where this may go. A lot of different attorney generals throughout the United States are all getting ready for this deadline that's coming up on December 8th when Joe Biden's new mandates are going to take effect for federal contractors. So a lot of people are bracing for impact as we get closer and closer to that date. We have a lot of other vaccine deadlines that are now coming into fruition around the country. So a lot of people have their attention, their eyes peeled. What are these federal courts going to do with these cases? We've seen the federal courts just kind of smack down other claims. We've seen state courts smack down attempts from different interest groups, different groups of individuals, healthcare workers, nurses, firefighters, police departments, different reactions from different courts all around the country. But we're starting to see now actual states suing the federal government. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of heft behind that. And so we're curious to see what the courts will do with it. Let's take a look at the lawsuit. We'll start off by checking out the press release that came out of DeSantis' office says today DeSantis announced a lawsuit against Biden and their orders requiring federal contractors and employees of federal contractors to be vaccinated by December 8th. They said that they were going to take legal action, and they did it. Lawsuit seeks an immediate end to the unlawful requirement that you get vaxxed. Governor is joined by Ashley Moody, who is going to be giving us some more details about the lawsuit. So we are going to go through the lawsuit. Before we get there, let's hear from Ron Desantis and see what he had to say about this today. Had a group of people who were all very excited about this because maybe the courts will rule in their favor, and they'll get to keep their jobs. So here is DeSantis in Florida.
The second thing that we're doing here, and I had promised last week that we were, of course, needing to pursue legislation through a special session, which is what we're going to do. But I also made very clear, given the nature of some of these mandates and how they raise questions about the federal government overstepping its authority, we are also going to need to pursue litigation. And so I'm happy to say today that with thanks to the Attorney General Ashley Moody's leadership, today the state of Florida has filed another lawsuit against the Biden administration. This lawsuit challenges the Biden administration's order imposing a vaccine mandate on federal contractors, which was going to apply on December 8th. And so just because you're a business that has federal contracts, it's not right for the federal government to come in and rewrite those contracts and then try to shoehorn this in. And then if you don't comply, so you either have to fire people, or if you don't comply, they'll just cancel the contract entirely, even though this is something that you bid for and you won fair and square. That's not the way we think business should be done. We don't think that they have the authority to do that. But you are going to see, if we're not successful challenging this, you will absolutely see disruptions in the economy. I mean, just think of all the airline workers that are balking at this. I mean, we've seen different issues in different airlines, and I know that there's very many more. So this lawsuit is filed in the Middle District of Florida, over in the Tampa division, and we are going to seek a preliminary injunction so that this mandate isn't allowed to be imposed at the expense of the jobs of Floridians. And we've got a very big footprint in Florida of companies that do contracting work for the federal government. We've got a lot of them over on the
Yep, and he's going to get into that, right? So he goes off and he tells you a little bit more about it, but a lot of what he says, I think, is absolutely accurate. And one of the same critiques that I've had about the Biden administration rolling this out, the new mandates through OSHA, through these federal contractor rules and all these types of little permutations, little tentacles, the way that they're going to try to incentivize people to get the vaccine through these different pseudo mandates that exist throughout federal law. And so what he comes out and he says, is it going to be like actually modifying a contract? So let's say, for example, Biden announced this, some time ago, a couple months ago. But what if you won a federal contract a year ago and you've already started to prepare for it? You've already started to get your widgets and get your boxes organized and rent a place, and you're going to do all this great work for the federal government. And then they come out and they issue a new mandate, and you say, well, I've already started to expect to do this work. I've already incurred some costs. I've already come out of pocket, invested in this contract. You have unilaterally changed it in a way that jeopardizes me. And so I was thinking from day one, this is all going to be very messy. In the courts, you're going to have people who say, well, you can't just change this. Otherwise, you revoke the contract. I don't know what all these contracts look like, or whether they're going to be revocable, or how they're made up. There's probably tens of thousands of different permutations of contracts with the federal government. But the point remains that it's like Darth Vader altering the deal, right? And that's a problem. He identifies the cascade of consequences that will happen as a result. We're already seeing it. We're already seeing it in New York City. They may have 25% of their police that don't show up to work on Monday as a result of these mandates. This is now starting at the federal level here in December. You heard DeSantis giving us some information about the Space Coast, right, in Florida, talking about all the different federal contractors that Florida businesses work with, a big list of them, and they sued all of them. You can see here in the lawsuit filed out of the district court, Middle District of Florida, the Tampa division. State of Florida versus Bill Nelson. He is the administrator of NASA. So NASA's getting sued. U.S. President Joe Biden, he's president. The Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council, Leslie Field getting sued. John Tengalia, the president of Defense and Pricing, Department of Defense, Jeffrey Kozes. We've got assistant administrator for NASA as well, also being sued. Office of Budget Management, a lot of people, right? Suing a lot of different people in the federal government, including Joe Biden. And so let's take a quick listen in. Let's hear from the Attorney General. This is Miss Moody, who's telling us a little bit more about the basis of this lawsuit. Here she is.
So much for being here with us today for this important announcement. Governor DeSantis and I have been clear. Never did we dream that in this administration we would be having to repeatedly push back on unlawful actions coming out of Washington and competent, reckless leadership coming out of Washington. But we're here. And we said when these vaccine mandates were announced that we would take legal action and push back. And I am proud to say today we are fulfilling that promise, and we have filed action in the Middle District of Florida challenging Joe Biden, NASA, OMB, GSA, and Bill Nelson for mandating that anyone with a federal contract require vaccination of all that work for them. In June, Joe Biden made clear that mandating vaccines, and I'm going to quote, is not the role of federal government.
Yeah.
It's true. It's not the role of federal government.
That's right.
They have absolutely no authority to require vaccines of the majority of the U.S. population, none whatsoever.
All right, so we'll take a look at that. Let's see what she is basing that off of. So we actually take a look at her lawsuit. This was filed, as I mentioned, in Florida federal court, and we can take a look at the introduction. This is a complaint for declaratory and preliminary and permanent injunctive relief. What that means is they want the court to say something, to declare something, and they want the court to do something. They want an injunction to stop this from going into effect. So a lot of this is very technical, kind of a boring lawsuit because we're talking about federal contract law, but there are a couple little interesting little needles in here. So let's take a look at it. Introduction. They say relying on a statute authorizing the president to prescribe policies, the Biden administration seeks to compel millions of Americans who work for the government contractors to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. Got that. Nothing in that statute that they reference the law authorizes such a radical intrusion on the personal autonomy of American workers, especially as is the case here when many of those workers are officials of a sovereign state. Okay, those are workers in Florida. But if federal law did authorize such a mandate, Biden administration's vaccine requirements would still be unlawful because the manner in which they were enacted violate the fundamental principles of administrative and procurement law. Okay, so we're sort of talking about two separate issues here. One, the Biden administration doesn't even have any authority in the first place to make vaccines mandatory. No authority for it. But if they did, well, the way they did it is also problematic, is what this is saying. They're also kind of not going along with the norms, the fundamental principles of procurement law, contract law, administrative law. Then they're going to dive into that, which is, sort of a backup argument. They say that the Regulatory Council, the FAR, is the agency that's in charge of this stuff. That's what the president's executive order contemplates, sort of superseding those. It orders and directs a safer workforce to draft the federal contractor vaccine requirements, along with many other onerous federal mandates. This violates certain exclusivity provisions, which requires notice, right? This is all the procurement stuff, a little bit boring here. The government cannot satisfy that exception, even if it could. They have to do it a different way, right? Temporary 30-day comment period, all of that stuff. So what they're talking about here is not sort of the underlying constitutional justification for vaccines. They're just saying for a vaccine mandate, they're just saying, let's presume that you do have the ability to do it. The way in which you're doing it is problematic. They say that the OMB rule approving the task force guidance is invalid under the act. Here's what they've got. The entire rationale provided for requiring federal contractors to follow the 13 pages of guidance is as follows. This is the justification for this. The task force guidance says, quote, these mandates will, quote, improve economy and efficiency by reducing absenteeism and decreasing labor costs for contractors and subcontractors working on or in connection with a federal government contract. That's it. It's the whole justification. It's like vaccine mandates are going to be very good and useful because we have found that they're going to increase efficiency and they're going to reduce absenteeism. Okay, well, that's a lot. You're asking us to do a lot. Anything more than that? Anything else you want to add to that? No, that's it. 13 pages, single spaced. That's it. That's all you get. And such conclusory justifications, they say, do not satisfy the law. They say, even though the president has sought to circumvent FAR's authority, the government is treating this guidance as binding. So they've created some guidance. They're treating that as binding. Making matters worse, the draft contract language violates the spending clause by conditioning Florida's receipt of the funds on Florida, making it conditioned on accepting the contract, even if it changes. Okay. This is kind of a boring lawsuit. On top of all these issues, the vaccine requirements are transparently pretextual. While the government pays lip service to the rationale of improving the economy, it openly admits that its true purpose is to, quote, get more people vaccinated and decrease the spread of COVID. Right? So, which is from FAR guidance and the White House's press briefing. Biden announced all of these vaccine mandates with a specific plan to require more Americans to be vaccinated. Having failed in its earlier attempts, you can see why they are using this now in order to get more jabs and arms. They're doing this under the guise of efficient procurement. They're saying it's pretextual. Here they say the government's unlawful vaccine requirements seek to interfere with Florida's employment practices. They threaten Florida with economic harm, and therefore they're seeking recourse. So, pretty boring lawsuit, actually, now that I have read it a little bit more closely. Not all that much is interesting there. They're sort of arguing about form, right? Not even so much in this introduction. The idea that the vaccine is unconstitutional. She kind of hints at that, but a lot of this is about form, really. It's about the way that they're imposing these mandates on federal contractors is just not done appropriately. Not giving them any time to make any changes, not giving them 30-day notices, not, giving clear guidance. The underlying justification is a little bit, lacking. But okay. Anyways, they're doing something about it. I'm not super optimistic that this is going to be the argument that wins, but we'll see. Like I said, I think a lot of this is going to be dealt with at the Supreme Court at some moment or time. Anyways, what they did in Florida is they brought all of those people you saw standing up behind DeSantis up there to say a little something. This gentleman, I forget what his name was, but I like what he had to say. So we'll wrap up with this before we jump into your questions. Here is the Ron DeSantis press conference as well.
And I want to be clear, this is not a conversation about a vaccine. This is a conversation about a federal overreach. This is a conversation about a mandate that disenfranchises people from their opportunity to pursue their goals and their American dream. I'm extremely troubled with the government's actions, trying to interfere with those personal health care decisions of our citizens and the clients that we serve.
Okay, so right on, right. Florida is doing a lot right now, and our love goes out to them for pushing back against the feds every which way you turn. Let's see what you have to say about this over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. See if we have any questions on this one. Cue some of these up. Geomancy says, what I don't understand from the left on vaccine mandates is this. Why are you firing people for not getting vaccinated? Can't you just tell them to wear masks? After all, for the past 18 months, we've been told to mask up and stop the spread. I mean, masks either work or they don't, right? Geo, that's a lot of logic that you're using here. Okay, that is like gone. Nobody cares about that anymore. Stop thinking rationally. We don't live in that country anymore. That all left a long time ago. Captain Jim says, speaking of Florida lawsuits, do you remember that one Florida man you covered some time ago banged out like a 200-page lawsuit against every federal agency under the sun over COVID mandates, all by his lonesome? You know if that lawsuit went anywhere? You know, I vaguely remember that, Captain Jim. Was that one? Was I laughing hysterically during that segment? I think I remember that, right? And the guy had like a purple tie or something. I don't think I followed that anywhere. But if I recall, that guy was a national treasure. Yeah, he wrote a massive lawsuit. I think I do remember that. It's hard to keep track, honestly. I read so much news, it's hard to keep track, but I don't know what happened with that one. Sergeant Bob says, back for a bit of halftime. Edwardsburg Eddie's 35, Pawpaw 0. Yes, scoreboard update 35-0. Do they have a mercy rule in high school still? Probably should. As much as I like President Trump, Governor DeSantis is the one to bring in the independents and the undecideds. We really need to win. That's from Sergeant Bob. I think that's a pretty astute observation there, Sergeant Bob. I like what I'm seeing from Florida. And shout out to your grandson. Hopefully he's got some of those points under his belt. But if not, there's always the next game. BB says, it almost sounds like the company itself would need to file a breach of contract. Does the state have standing? I'm definitely on the state's side. It's a good question. I mean, ordinarily I would say yes, but, the whole law has changed pretty dramatically because we saw that even when states wanted to sue other states over election stuff, the Supreme Court was like, no, there's no standing there. So I don't know. I thought at one point that would be an easy question, but much of the law is sort of in bizarro world, like a lot of other things in this country. It's Jake from Oxford. Ugh, this guy. Rob, the guy standing directly behind DeSantis during his speech was getting directly blasted by the Holy Spirit. It's Jake from Oxford. Jake. He's very smart. I got to hand it to him. Sweet Potato says, last segment comment, Rob. Maybe don't read this up on air. Up to you. Am I your only not... Okay. Yeah. So I think I can read this comment if you're okay with that. Up to you. So I can read this. Says, Rob, and I think this is very valid. And I think this is a very, very, vulnerable comment. And I appreciate you sharing it, Sweet Potato. Says, am I your only not totally white listener? Hearing people talk in chat about shooting and turrets for people wanting to come here is crazy painful. What the F? I'm just a mix that can't speak Spanish while trying to fit in. Just had a comment. What the F? Those would have been my family members not too long ago. Like if there was a great place and you could just walk in there and be let in, wouldn't you? That's from Sweet Potato. Yeah, I understand your point, right? I'm hopeful. I really hope that nobody really, wants to just, execute people anywhere. I think that sometimes, right, people can be facetious and people can, get really fed up with a problem and can jump out and use visuals like that I don't agree with, but I can understand people's frustration. But I have a hard time believing that anybody would actually want to do that. I have a tremendous amount of empathy for people coming across the border. The reason I get so fired up about this stuff is because of the humanitarian crisis it is causing. It's because people are shoving themselves in U-Hauls. They're dying by the hundreds on the treks up here. People are getting raped. Children are getting thrown in bushes. It's a catastrophe, right? And I think a lot of that is caused by U.S. policies. It's incentivizing people to make that journey. And I agree with you, right? If they're going to come here and get $500,000 or whatever they're promised, why would you not go? I think it's also a problem because it disincentivizes people in their home countries to cause change at home. The United States has sort of been this pressure relief valve for a lot of other countries around the world. Rather than improving themselves, they just, we don't have to solve anything for our people. Why? Because who cares? They just leave. They go to the United States. It's not our problem anymore. So, Sweet Potato, I think it's very nice that you shared that with us. I hope that I didn't offend you when I was sort of, laughing at some of those comments. I was, dismissive of them. I understand that, they can be hurtful. And there are a lot of people who are hurt by immigration, right? There are a lot of people on the other side of this equation who are tired of this problem. And so frustrations are high. It's a humanitarian crisis on both sides, no question about it. I just think it's largely caused by our government. They're creating perverse incentives. They're manipulating the demographical markets to some degree, causing this to happen. And so, no, certainly I do not endorse, death or pain or suffering on anybody, anywhere, really. I'm a defense lawyer, right? My goal is to keep people out of jail, out of hurt, and rehab their lives so they don't cause more hurt to other people out there in society. And I have a tremendous amount of empathy for everybody in this crisis. And so I think what you heard today was just something born out of frustration. But it's a good reminder. Okay, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about human lives. So you're right. Thank you for the check on that. Chairman of the board says, I don't know if DeSantis is running for president, but it feels like he's certainly doing all of the right things to put himself politically in position. I absolutely agree. I think he's running in 2024. Speech Unleashed says Alaska Railroads initially rolled out a vaccine mandate for their employees in compliance to Biden's mandate because they have government contracts. However, due to employee complaints, they decided to rescind that requirement. They said they would rather lose their government contract than lose their skilled employees. Hope more businesses do this. I agree with you. I hope so too. I think that's the right way to do it, right? Make it a business decision. Former LEO says, what this country needs is a good general strike. What if everyone who feels abused by Biden took a long 4-day weekend? I think that power of the people might be a good slogan. That's how Poland stopped communism. The people who ran the country had a different idea. Maybe the Republican Party should start using solidarity as our identity, which is what we the people means. What's happening to my country is much more than vaccine mandates, and it's more destructive. I agree. I think it's just more, it's sort of a symptom of an encroaching government. COVID is just the pretext for a lot of it. All of it. Speech Unleashed says, nice to know that the Biden admin has ignored the science that vax people can still get COVID and get sick from it. It isn't going to prevent people from having to call in because they've gotten COVID even after being fully vaxxed. That's right. But they don't care about any of that. They just want the jab in the arm. That's it. Stop with the rationalizations of anything else. They don't care. They don't care so much. They will throw highly qualified people who've been working for 20 years right out on the streets without even batting an eye. That's how much your government cares for you. And those police officers, those firefighters, those nurses or doctors, those are your neighbors. They're in your communities and mine. Nadarb says, just wanted to follow up on my comment from the last segment. So the border group was chanting an Obama slogan, not named after it, Si se puede, aka Yes We Can. And the group's name is Pueblo Sin Fronteras, People Without Borders. Just wanted to make that clear. Source on this is a Fox News clip. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that additional context from Nadarb. And a few more before we wrap up on the day. Zulu Zeit fan says DeSantis Grueller 2024. I'd run with Ron. Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be a lot of fun. I could get out there and be a little pit bull for Ron. I could do that. The VP has to be that really aggressive, get out there, and I'd have to go after Kamala Harris. That'd be a lot of fun. I've already impeached that woman, so I could do it no problem at all. We have Kincaid says, it's a complex topic, but the solution is rather direct. Let the science prove the validity from as many sources as possible. Additionally, allow SCOTUS to drop the hammer. And they will at some point. We have Monster One says, to answer Geomancy's question, it's not about COVID or stopping the spread. It's about compliance. They want people getting used to being dependent on government so that you always look to them for whatever you need. And you always vote for them. And you give them more of your money and more of your life. Thunder 7 says, I love DeSantis. Nothing to add, but I really wanted to let your viewers know about a Tucker special airing on November 1st. It's got a lunatic left really riled up, so you know it's good. I think it's called Patriot Purge. He talks about false flags like January 6th. Unexpected guest, which will be surprising according to the promo. Look out for it, everyone. It's going to make our weekend very happy to know that the truth is being shown on TV for once. That's from Thunder 7. And that means that's coming up soon, isn't it? November 1, Monday. Yeah, I saw that. They are triggered about that. Liz Cheney, highly triggered. Oh, disinformation. Okay, relax. Relax. All right, couple more questions. Sweet Potato says, nah, I'm good. I love you all. Thanks for addressing, Rob. Just saying, put the blame on the empty promises, people. Yeah, right. The people who are coming, they're people, right? They're human beings. Fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, all of that. They're just human beings. And America's a pretty damn great country. Even though we're a male patriarchy full of white supremacist racists. We have Mustang Jeff says, wonder if anyone in the federal government can get and survive COVID. I don't know. Mustang Jeff, I hope so. I hope they all survive it. Greg Murat says, too sweet potato. I am not white. Last time I checked, and I listened to Rob. I think the issue is with illegal immigration and not the legal immigration. That's where all the frustration comes in. It's not about race. It's about when people fraud the system, like Rob said. Well, thanks for chiming in on that, Greg. Yeah, you know, I understand. Sometimes we can get a little bit jokey here, right? There's a concept in criminal law and in life called gallows humor, right? Gallows humor. It's like, you know, something criminal defense attorneys have said, you know, I don't endorse it, but there's a domestic violence type of charge that is a serious felony when it involves any choking around the neck. Impeding of the airway is how they say it in the law. And so sometimes defense attorneys will just call those, you know, throat hugs, just little throat hugs. Oh, just a little throat hug. That's all. That's all. Oh, is a throat hug? That's it. Gallows humor. Okay. Not even funny. Very inappropriate. But, you know, sometimes it's just a throat hug that has gone wrong. And so it's stuff like that, right? It's not funny. Yes, domestic violence is not funny. Yes, people choking each other out is not funny. I get it. But sometimes people will just sort of revert to gallows humor, and it will kind of become, you know, comical, but we can't disassociate that from what we're actually talking about, right? People are people. These are human beings. These are children. And it honestly, it breaks my heart. It makes my stomach turn when I see them stacked up in, you know, in the truck beds of semi trailers. It's like a modern day humanitarian crisis, and it's not far from me. It's really a strange thing that's happening, and it feels like it's almost all self-imposed, right? This is the United States of America. Why do we have 200,000 people dragging their lives across the border in 2021? It's like we can't get control of this thing. It's nuts. But it continues on my whole life, every administration. Okay, let's see what else we have here. A couple more questions. Klaus Schwab says, my minions inform me that you criticized me. How dare you? I am the supreme leader, and the world will own nothing and be happy, except the 1%, of course. We'll own everything. We get to eat the meat while the peasants eat the nettles or the beetles or whatever they are. That guy is trouble. Go watch something of his. You'll see it. I think everybody will hate it. Even Democrats will watch that and they'll go, this guy's a lunatic. But they don't know it. Kincaid says, it is a fact no nation could survive a constant influx of immigrants. The economy, ideals, efficiency would change and suffer. Building other nations up and integrate economies may be the key. I think there's a good point to that, right? Kamala was talking about that. She was going to go and help them deal with, you know, young girls and education in Guatemala. Don't know why that didn't stop the migration problem, though. It's confusing. Monster One says, Monster One. All right, so we're going to wrap up the comments here on that one. And I think that's all that we've got here, my friends. So let's start off. Well, let's wrap up the week with some shout outs to my friends over on Rumble. We've got user 1121. We've got free Appalachians in the house over there. A couple people chatting away. Rumble is coming along nicely. Over on YouTube in our secret unlisted recording YouTube chat, we have Zulus in the house, K-Bean playing hooky. We got Minecraft Boy 210, and others are chatting away. Shout out to Just Cause and playing hooky. And then, of course, at our home base at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, big shout outs to everybody over there. Look 2G, former LEO, Lisa Lemon. We got Phil in Flyover, Speech Unleashed, Bittersweet, Tremendous is here, Geomancy, I'm Not Gas, Radicy, Soul Viking, Avalon, Feisty, Jackalaya, Be Spec, Miss Lucky, Be Brave, Nadarb, Savdi. Many others are chatting away at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Full house over there today. And that, my friends, is it for me for the show for the day. We're going to leave it right there. Want to welcome a couple new people who signed up over to be a part of our community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Big shout outs to Hyperspectral, who signed up. Welcome to you. Aaron Caroline also, welcome. We've got Dave 520, Donna B 300, Roybot also signed up. We have Ronnie Cole, French Toast, the AI Guy, Martini Junkie, Just Cows, a Cold Painter, and many others signing up over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. $5 a month to join, $50 a year annually. And we're having a lot of fun doing more morning live streams before I sort of get settled in on the camera, doing more recording for the law firm, making an entire video series about my book, called Beginning to Winning, how to fight your case and succeed in the criminal justice system. So I'm working on that. And before I get going, I kind of like to get warmed up. And so we've been doing a little bit more live streams on locals, just kind of, unscheduled, sporadically. And so if you want to catch some of those, come check us out at our community. We also have a monthly locals meetup that's taking place via Zoom Saturday, November 6th, 7 to 8 p.m. So not this weekend, but the next weekend. And we hope you join us for that. It's a lot of fun. Join us. Come with your camera on. Come with your real name, fake name, whatever you want to do. You can register over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com when it is time. But mark that down on your calendar. And so I want to thank you for being a part of the show this week. We had a lot of fun. My friends, we're going to be back here on Monday to do it all again. We record at 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern time at our community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. The show premieres on YouTube right after that, as soon as I can get it edited and uploaded, typically around 7:30, 8 o'clock Arizona time, which makes it a little bit later for our friends on the East Coast. But I hope you join us the next time back here on Monday. Until then, my friends, have a tremendous evening, have a tremendous weekend. Sleep very well, unplug from politics, spend time with friends and family and loved ones, re-energize those battery cells, because we're going to come back here on Monday. We're going to get right back into it. Have a tremendous weekend, my friends. Be well. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.